Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Shahab, and in this video I want to talk about naming patterns in the AUA framework. One of the most important concepts to consider in any project is naming patterns. If a project does not have proper naming rules, each developer will make the naming at their discretion, which will confuse the project. As we've read in the clean code book, you should name a variable with the same care we do in naming a firstborn child. The layer naming pattern in the AUA framework is as follows: company name dot project name dot layer name. The company name can be 3 or 4 characters, then the name of the project, and finally the layer name. For example, there is a company whose name is Hilton. The Hilton will use the following naming pattern for its shop projects layers: hill.shop.common, hill.shop.data layer, and so on. Hills here stands for the Hilton. The shop is the name of the project, and third part of the name is name of the layer. These layers can be less or more on different projects. Now let me describe this pattern for the entity and model by an example. For instance, for the entity of person, the AUA does naming in this way: entity person. For entity config, the AUA name it as person config. Data transfer object, person DTO. View model, person VM, and for data model, person DM or person VO. Let me add some information for the DTO. 3 layers including service, API, and UI will interact with the DTO. The DTO layer is mapped from the entity, and it is equal or greater than the entity, not less than it. It means that all the fields which exist in the entity also exist in the DTO. It can be more, but not less. Now imagine you want to interact with UI, and the number of fields which you want to work with are very less than the DTO's fields. In this case, it is not a good idea to work with DTO. It's better you create a view model class and put those items in it and interact with the UI. About the data model, for instance, you have a function that has 10 or 12 inputs as parameters. In this case, it's better to create a model and put those fields inside it and pass this model to the function. The AUA calls it data model or value object. Therefore, the data model is acting as input or output for services, and there is no relation between the data model and UI or between data model and the entity. In fact, the data model just has to send or receive the parameters between services. Another concept at the AUA is naming the view models which use for actions. The AUA uses the DTO as long as a DTO meets our need to work with an entity. But if the difference in the number of fields is too large, the naming method will be different. For instance, we need to pass different parameters during interacting with delete, update, and insert actions. Well, in this case, we will use this pattern to naming the view models: action plus entity plus view model. For example, for the person, we use this pattern: insert person VM, update person VM, delete person VM, bulk insert person VM. As you noticed, the AUA has its naming pattern, and for every concept, the AUA assigns a specific naming pattern. Developers can easily understand the structure of code by checking the naming pattern. And overall, the AUA is just suggesting these naming patterns to you. Of course, you can have your own naming pattern. Well, thank you for watching.